We don't tend to build a lot of gaming PC builds on the channel anymore, but it's been quite a while since our last one, so we thought, why not, in an attempt to kick off a new series of videos. So today we'll be going for the ultimate AMD CPU and AMD GPU based system, going through all of the parts and why we chose them. And then we'll be showing you exactly how it performs in games, the temperatures and all that other good stuff. But before we get into that, here's a quick word from this video sponsor.
I'm never going to be an esports gamer. I never get any kills.
I wouldn't be so sure of that.
Is that Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com?
Yes, my son. It is me, Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com.
What are you doing here?
I'm here to bestow upon you a gift that will transform you into a true gamer. With a 24.5-inch Full HD screen, 240Hz refresh rate, 0.5 millisecond response time, AMD FreeSync Premium, and height adjustability, you'll be gaming in the big leagues in no time.
Oh, thank you.
No problem, my son. Why don't you check out the link in the description below to find out more.
So in preparation for this build, we took to the community to see exactly what you guys and girls wanted to see in terms of AMD or Intel for the CPU, and then of course AMD or Nvidia for the GPU. And as always, we went with the most popular option, which this time was AMD for both. Now, don't worry, if you are looking for an Intel CPU and Nvidia GPU based build, we are actually working on that behind the scenes. And if you want to see more about kind of what's going on with that, we do have some exclusive behind the scenes content for our Patreon members. The link is, as always, down below. Now, with this being the ultimate PC build you can do right now, let's talk about the CPU to start. If you're into gaming and are dead set on having an AMD based build, there are a couple of choices you could go for in terms of the latest lineup of X3D based processors. If focusing on having the best of the best, then the 7950 X3D is the clear choice. But as this build is more geared towards gaming, we've gone with the 7800 X3D, which offers up better value for money for those types of users who solely want to play games. The 7800 X3D is still no slouch when it comes to productivity, with 8 cores and 16 threads and a boost clock of 5 GHz. But really it's the 96 meg of L3 cache that really makes it stand out in gaming, especially in titles that can really harness the true potential of 3D V-cache, like Microsoft Flight Sim, and that's where AMD have Intel beat, especially as this particular chip slots in perfectly price-wise between the i7-13700K and its bigger brother, the i9-13900K. For the motherboard, we've gone with the Aorus X670E Extreme. Now, I won't lie and say it's cheap, but it is packed full of features, looks great and has exceptional VRM cooling, meaning that if we want to push our hardware to the limits, it should do it without breaking a sweat. It has tons of room for expansion too, including support for PCIe Gen 5 drives, tons of USBs, and 10GB LAN. For me, the most important part of the board is the design, and if you're wanting a system that's not only fast and functional, you want it to look fantastic too. And the Aorus Extreme really does set the bar for that, with its huge amount of cooling armour, reinforced memory and PCI Express slots, and of course RGB lighting. In terms of memory, we have to be a bit careful because as we are using AMD, there's only so fast we can go. While I'd love to put a 7600 MHz or higher kit in this build, the Intel i9-13900K is the only one that can work and kind of harness the potential of it. That's where instead we turn to the Thermaltake ToughRAM XG RGB D5 6000 MHz 32GB kit. While larger and faster kits are available, it's always worth checking your motherboard's QVL list to see what is compatible, and also remembering that from our own tests, faster memory doesn't always mean more performance. And in terms of value for money on the AMD platform, 6000 MHz is more than enough. For storage, we could have gone for a Gen 5 drive, but again, when it comes to gaming, I feel you'd just be wasting your money between Gen 5 and Gen 4. And that's why we've gone with the Rocket Plus 4TB from Sabrent. Not only are you getting blistering fast speeds, that means your games will load fast, but 4TB of space means you'll have tons of room for games, including Call of Duty. Now obviously 4TB is going to be overkill for some gamers, so given the choice you could go for something smaller, like a 1 or 2TB, and then a larger hard drive to keep costs down, though you will sacrifice speed somewhat. GPU wise, and sticking with AMD as per the polls we put out, the best AMD graphics card right now is the 7900 XTX. And wanting to stick with the same brand as the motherboard, we've gone with the Aorus RX 7900 XTX Elite. While it will be more expensive than say a reference model or AMD's own NBA card, you are getting a lot more for your money. Not only are you getting the top tier AMD GPU with plenty of scope for up to 4K gaming, along with support for ray tracing, you are also getting the patented WindForce cooler design, faster clock speeds, great build quality, and that all important RGB, which is obviously a big focus for this build along with airflow and cooling. Also, being the same brand as the motherboard does mean syncing the RGB up to match should be effortless, while also looking amazing at the same time. Now, to keep our CPU nice and cool, we've gone with the Thermaltake Tough Liquid Ultra 360 AIO cooler, which should be more than enough cooling potential for our CPU with its large radiator and high performance cold plate, while also looking amazing at the same time due to its 2.1-inch rotatable LCD display, which is fully customizable to put images, GIFs, or even display system information on. While the cooler does come with 3 Thermaltake ToughFan 12 turbo fans included, to keep the whole system consistent, we'll actually be using some other fans which I'll talk about shortly to match the rest of the build. For the power supply, with such high-end parts, we needed one that would match up quite nicely, and that's where the Thermaltake Tough Power GF3 1350 watt unit comes in. Being ATX 3.0 compliant, having 100% Japanese capacitors, an 80 plus gold rating, and coming with a 10-year warranty, it seems to tick all of the right boxes. It also has the PCIe 5.0 12VH PWR connector if using NVIDIA based GPUs, but as we're using a 7900 XTX, that's not really important to us today. It also has a fully modular design and has a Smart Zero fan, so should be easy to cable manage and keep cool and quiet. And with the unit being 1350 watt, it does also give us a ton of extra room if wanting to upgrade at a later date, though there's nothing on the AMD side in terms of CPU or GPU that can actually beat this anyway. Case-wise, we wanted something big, brash, bold, and full of space. And of course, that all-important airflow. While the 7800X3D is only a 120 watt part, and the 7900 XTX that we've gone with shouldn't cause any issues with cooling, having the ability to have lots of airflow is only going to do wonders for the whole build. And that's where the Thermaltake CTE 750 Air comes in. With a large footprint and big emphasis on airflow, it's more than big enough for our eATX motherboard and some of the largest GPUs, coolers and power supplies on the market. With a full front mesh and plenty of mesh on the rear, we'll be able to get some really cool clean air to pass through it and expel out the rear and top of the case. It also supports 420mm radiators and comes with 3 pre-installed 140mm CT140 fans, though we'll be putting our own fans in as this case has support for 14 120mm fans or 14 140mm fans, or even has the ability for a mixture, including the space for 4 200mm fans for the ultimate airflow build, whilst maintaining the very best acoustics. Now, speaking of fans, we're going to be installing a total of 14 Thermaltake SWAFAN EX12 RGB fans to really maximise the capabilities of the case and to push as much airflow as possible, while also pushing the RGB to the max. Being SWAFAN EXs means that the fans come with swappable fan blades depending on your use case scenario and have magnetic connections, which helps aid in cable management and making the build as clean as possible. The total cost of the build comes in at just under $3,800, which I get is out of the reach for most avid gamers, but this is the ultimate AMD Gaming PC build that you can do right now, and really no expense has been spared. Now, while you could add more memory in or even that slightly higher spec CPU, for sheer gaming it's not going to make hardly any difference, if any at all. So from a wastage standpoint, I just don't think it's worth it. And I'm more than happy with the spec that we have here. Also, if you don't fancy having 14 fans, or if you do want 14 but maybe not RGB, you could save some money there, but you will be sacrificing on performance or looks. But really that comes down to a personal choice. Obviously, to put this in here, the prices are correct at the time of filming as they may fluctuate, so keep that in mind as well. And some parts have actually seen some price cuts lately, which has helped to bring the cost of this down ever so slightly. Okay, so starting off the build, anyone who's seen any of the kind of builds I've done in the past will know I like to do as much as I physically can on the motherboard outside of the case. It just makes life a little bit easier. So we're going to start with the processor, which is I guess a little bit different to what you're used to if you have used AM4 before, but obviously with AM5 we do have a slightly different socket. So lifting up the arm and moving this over, you will actually see on the socket itself there is a little arrow, and there is an arrow that corresponds on the processor as well. It really can only go in one way once you've matched that up. There are a couple of notches, so really you can't actually get it wrong. Obviously you want to be careful of the pins and things like that, but once you go to put this down, you actually see, quite kind of cool I think, this pops off. Now beyond that we can put the memory in and we can put the SSD in as well. So we've got our trusty handy dandy eTeknix toolkit with the screwdriver, of which we can take these 2 screws off. We're going to go with the top slot, even though I think actually on this motherboard every single one of the M.2 slots is PCIe Gen 5, but typically you want to go with the top one and kind of work your way down. Now there are some little protective covers on here, So we just want to make sure that we get that off, just because Gen 4 and Gen 5 drives do actually get quite sort of hot. So we want to make sure that, you know, we're giving it everything we can in terms of, you know, trying to keep it nice and cool. Again, on the SSD, there is a little notch on here, so you can't really get it wrong. You don't need to force it in or anything like that. So we can put that in like that. And with the pretty cool feature of this particular motherboard, there is actually like a little latch, so you don't actually have to screw it down. Now we do want to make sure that we are peeling off of here as well, and then we can get this back down. So lastly, we've got our memory, and for anyone who doesn't know, there is a little bit of a rhyme when you're using dual channel memory, which is roses are red, violets are blue, put your RAM in slots 4 and 2. So it's the second one away from the CPU and the fourth one away from the CPU. Generally, if you do get confused, you can refer to the motherboard manual, or sometimes there is actually, like on this one, little markings on there that says A1, A2, B1, B2, and so forth. Now, the cooler we're going to be using actually does use the retention brackets that come on this motherboard, so we don't need to worry about sort of, you know, replacing anything there. But now we've basically done everything we can before we can actually look to get this inside the case. Okay, so let's talk about cooling, and these are the Swafan EX12 RGB fans, and they're actually very, very cool. Firstly, because they snap together with ease, but also we are going to be using these, I guess, slightly differently. So they do come with the fan blades on there, but you can actually pop them off, because at the moment these particular fan blades mean that the air is being pushed through this way, whereas we actually want it to go the opposite way because of where we're going to be placing our AIO. So in the box you do get reverse fan blades, which literally just push on. So one, the other one, it is easier to actually push it from the back. Take that one off, get the next one, pop that in, that's 2, and then the last one, pop that off, and get that one into there. Nice and easy. And then we can put these together through their magnetic connection and start putting them onto our AIO. Okay, so our AIO, this is the Tough Liquid 360 Ultra, and we have already got the AMD retention bracket on there, which makes things a lot easier for us. This is just going to go over the existing brackets that are on our motherboard, but we do want to get these fans installed onto the radiator. So to do that, it does make life so much easier when they are actually magnetically put together, because we can just line them up on our radiator, grab the included screws that come with the AIO, and just start screwing them down into place. Okay, so the beauty of this case, which is the Thermaltake CTE C750 Air, is that you can actually strip it down quite dramatically to sort of the bare bones. So we've taken the front panel off, the top panel off, the rear. We are actually able to take out this bottom plate as well, so that we can obviously install fans nice and easily. And with it stripped down, we can now look to actually put our motherboard into place. And there are, I think there's about 7 standoffs that we actually need for this motherboard. So just lining things up, grabbing our screwdriver, and yeah, screwing it down into place. Okay, so with the motherboard in place, we do actually want to remove all of the fans that come pre-installed, because we do have, I think, 14 in total that we're going to be putting here, including the 3 that we've already put onto the AIO. So this case does actually come with 3 fans as standard, but yeah, we're going to remove every single one of them and put in some nicer Swafan EXs with that all-important RGB. Okay, so with the fans out, we can now look at taking out other brackets, because like I say, this case is actually really good at being able to strip things down. Moving the case out of the way, we can then look to sort of figure out what we're going to do. Now, this is actually the bracket for the bottom of the case. So with that in mind, we are going to have our 3 fans, but I think for aesthetic purposes, obviously that doesn't look the best in comparison to that, but then we're pushing airflow down. So again, what we want to do is take the fans, pop out the middle, and it's quite cool actually. They do include a syringe of what looks like grease of some kind, so that you can, I guess, lube up the bearing, because once you take this off, you can kind of see what's going on. And if you are constantly kind of taking the propellers, the blades off and doing things like that, you might want to, yeah, sort of make it a little bit more fluid at the same time. So popping all 3 of these out, which is extremely easy. I guess the first time you go to do it, it does feel a little bit weird, a little bit different from kind of the norm. But now we can look to, get that installed onto that bracket and fit the rest of this big stack of fans. So with all the fans installed, I want to talk about how they actually go together. Obviously they are magnetized, but they also come with this. So you only actually need one cable per set of 3 fans. Now you can, depending on your case and everything, daisy chain up to 6 of them. But for this, it just literally goes onto the end, it's magnetized, and then we can feed the cable through into the rear of the case. And basically these 3 fans are now ready to go. Now, there are some hubs that are going to be involved just to be able to control the lighting, to power it and all of that kind of stuff. But the beauty is, as you can see here, they can be daisy chained. So from the motherboard, we can go into one, we can then split off into the second one and split off into the third one. Because we have actually got, I think, 14 fans in total, what that means is that we do need 3 hubs, because at the moment, and Thermaltake are working on a new hub for this, you can plug in up to 6 fans per hub. So we've got 6, 12, and then the other 2 on the third one. But as I say, daisy chaining it does make cable management so much easier compared to kind of what we used to. And then this just plugs straight into the motherboard, and then we do have our power, which sadly is Molex, but there are reasons behind this. I was actually having a conversation recently about this, and SATA just can't deliver the same amount of power as to what Molex can. So that is the route that it's going to have to go down at the moment. But you're talking 3 fairly slim cables, 1 cable to the motherboard, everything else just daisy chains in. Okay, so with the case laid down, it's time to put some thermal paste on. Now, there are many different methods. Some of them work, some of them maybe not so much. For me, I'm just going to go with the P method in the middle. Obviously you can do the cross, the line, and kind of all that stuff, but for me, the P method just seems to work. Now, I know what the comments are going to say, I put on too much. Other comments are going to say, I put on too little. That is the amount that I would typically use, and it seems to work out absolutely fine. Now, in terms of your AIO, the tubes are going to potentially restrict as to kind of which way you can go. For us, it is going to mean that we're going to have to put it on this way. But the beauty of this AIO is that the screen itself is actually rotatable. So we can, once it's screwed down, if it's not in the kind of position that we want it to be in, we can actually kind of rotate the screen around a little bit and make it fit the orientation of which way we've actually got it up. So tightening these down, you will get to a point where you can't tighten it anymore. And you want to do sort of the top one, then the bottom one a little bit, then the top one some more, and then the bottom one a little bit more. And then the only connector that we've actually got is the one for the pump itself. So we can cable manage that, route that how we want, and then we can put it directly onto the header on the motherboard. Okay, so in terms of the power supply, we need to think about what cables we're going to need. Obviously, we are going to need a 24 pin, we're going to need 2 8-pin EPS connectors, our PCI Express, of which we actually have 3 lots here, and then a Molex for them all important controllers for the fans. Now, if we were going NVIDIA, then this power supply does have the native 12VH PWR, but we're going AMD. So we don't need that. So let's talk about the graphics card, 7900 XTX Aorus Elite. Now, in this case, it is quite modular in the way that you can present your graphics card. So we could have had it kind of bog standard in there like that going into the motherboard, but we sort of thought from an aesthetic standpoint that we do things slightly differently. So what we've actually got is this bracket that comes with a case that screws on, this rotates round, and then with the inclusion of a riser cable, which is sold separately, we can actually get the graphics card in there like that, and I just think it looks a lot better, especially when you think about the cables that are down here. They're just going to kind of go into the side of the card, and well, really, you're not actually going to see it. So our build is done, and overall I think it looks pretty damn special. But now for the moment of truth, does it boot? And yes, we have lighting, so yeah. As far as stock lighting goes, I'm pretty happy with how it all looks. Obviously, with the sheer amount of RGB, you can tweak this to your heart's content, or if you want to save some money, as I mentioned, you could just sack off all the RGB in favour of more of a stealth build. Now, the build itself was pretty simple, though with any big PC system with tons of fans, you are going to have to be, I guess, somewhat inventive with the cables and controllers, but generally speaking, it goes hand in hand that if you can fit a lot of fans, then you're going to have a lot of room for cable management, so it's not really much of an issue. It has booted, and before we get into testing, there are a few things that we want to do first within the BIOS. Firstly, you're going to want to make sure that everything is being picked up properly, including the right amount of memory sticks, and that the temperature of your processor is kind of within reasonable limits. And then really the only thing that actually needs doing on this particular one for now is setting Expo, which we can do just here, or XMP, making sure that the memory is running at the right speed, so 6000 megahertz. So that's all good. Then if you want, depending on how your fans are set up, you can tweak your fan curve from within the BIOS, but because of ours is actually kind of going through a controller, we have to do that in the software. And then you get a choice of if you want to sacrifice kind of performance over silence or vice versa. Once that's done, we can then save out of the BIOS, we can go into actually look to install Windows, and then we can get testing. Starting things off with Cyberpunk at 4K and with the Ray Tracing Ultra preset enabled and with FSR 2.1 set to auto, which basically maxes everything out, including the ray tracing settings as well. Now as we jump into the game, we can see we're for the most part between 60 and 75 FPS, and the game feels extremely fluid. And with ray tracing enabled, it looks absolutely gorgeous as we drive around Night City. In terms of temperatures, our CPU was hovering around 67 degrees, while our GPU was at a cool and comfortable 59 degrees, thanks to the sheer amount of airflow from the case and the 14 fans that we installed. Moving on to Doom Eternal, and again at 4K with ray tracing enabled and setting things to the Ultra Nightmare preset. And as we jump into the game, it's carnage as expected, but our frame rates are still great at between 110 FPS for the small glory kill scenes, while the rest of the gameplay was between 150 and 180 FPS. And again, thanks to the Ultra settings and ray tracing, the level of detail is great. In terms of temperatures, even with all of our 14 fans set to silent, we're still only sitting at 59 degrees for both the CPU and GPU, all while remaining silent during gameplay. In F123, and again set to 4K and with everything as high as it can go using the ultra high preset, which automatically sets ray tracing on and to its highest possible setting. And as we move into the game, FPS wise, we're between 55 and 64 FPS, though for the most part we're just above 60 FPS. Though even with the dips, it still feels extremely fluid in terms of gameplay. Again, when looking at our temperatures, neither hit above 60 degrees, with the CPU sitting around 56, while the GPU again came in around 59 degrees. So amazing performance for one of the latest titles that's also completely maxed out. As we move on to Hogwarts Legacy, we're setting FSR 2 to balance mode to try and regain the frames we lose by maxing the game out as much as we can by setting everything to Ultra, though the game automatically set that to recommended, which happened to be Ultra anyway. Along with this, again, we're turning ray tracing on and setting that to Ultra too. Now in game, we're seeing kind of frame rates between the low 60s and high 70s as we move throughout the building and different rooms. Temperature wise and keeping consistent, we're seeing CPU temperatures of between 63 and 66 degrees, while again, that GPU temperature is holding firmly at around 60 degrees. Finally, finishing things off with Spider-Man at 4K with FSR 2.1 enabled and on the very high preset with ray tracing on and set to very high. And first and foremost, the game looks amazing, with the reflections off the glass of the buildings and that shiny surface texture on the road. Now as we swing around New York City, we're seeing frame rates of around 80 FPS with a few dips here and there, but only momentarily. The CPU temperature again stuck to its guns between 63 and 64 degrees, while that GPU again did not budge over 60 degrees, showing that the Aorus Elite with that huge case with tons of airflow and 14 fans really does make for a cool and quiet system. So some pretty damn amazing performance across a few of the latest and most demanding titles. And looking at the temperatures, things were kept nicely under control at around sort of 60 to 65 degrees across the CPU and the GPU. It's nothing that anyone's going to grumble at, and just listening to the whole system while we were playing those games, it didn't really cause any concern. It actually remained pretty damn silent throughout. So there we have it, the ultimate AMD gaming PC system that you can build right now, and as its thermal take, I did want to give an honorary mention to the Argent E700 leather gaming chair that you've seen in pretty much every one of our videos for the last maybe 6 months or so. I can only really describe it as a captain's chair from Star Trek, because that's how it feels and looks, with the single kind of one-piece curved back design that was made in collaboration with Porsche. With that in mind, it does almost feel like you're sitting in a bucket-style racing chair, and with real leather, it really is a huge step up from the kind of gaming chairs that we constantly see floating around on the internet. That aside, I think the system actually came out great. The performance is, as you saw, amazing, and this really is the ultimate AMD gaming PC build that you can do right now. Sure, we could have gone with the 7950X3D, and in the future as BIOS updates roll out, AMD are getting better in the memory department, so higher capacity and faster speed memory would have been nice. But for now, we're still somewhat restricted. Now for those who are toying between AMD and Intel, don't worry, as we will be giving Intel a similar treatment in an upcoming video where we look to build the ultimate Intel gaming PC build. So make sure you're subscribed for that. For now, that's going to do it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, a like and a sub to the channel would be amazing. And if you love what we do, then consider joining the exclusive Patreon Members Club, where you'll get access to a whole host of goodies, including behind the scenes content, monthly live streams, game nights, access to our testing data, and much, much more. The link is, as always, down below. Also, if you're looking for somewhere to chat and play games, then definitely check out our super friendly Discord. Again, the link for that is down below. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.